So thank you all again for joining us here tonight for Strange Disappearances with Shane. Oh, Shane, I didn't practice your last name and we didn't talk beforehand. Sirois? How am I doing?
Sirois.
Sirois. Well, I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Thousands of people in the United States have gone missing without any logical explanation. It's bizarre and it's scary. Explore some of these cases and commonalities with different paranormal cases. Led by Shane Sirois, who has been researching and investigating the supernatural for over 30 years. His process to identify trends within the various fields have brought new light on the subject of paranormal mechanics and how they work. Amongst many other shows Shane frequently appears on, he is a regular guest co-host on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And for those who are regulars, you'll know that we hosted Paul and Ben last year. And Shane is staying up extra late tonight. He's also doing another radio show, I believe tonight at midnight. So we really appreciate him squeezing us into his busy schedule. I know the Halloween season is in particular very busy for him. So let's give a big virtual round of applause to Shane for joining us here tonight. And Shane, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. I want to thank the Tewksbury Library for inviting me, and I appreciate everyone coming to spend the evening with us. But so Strange Disappearances, well, first of all, I'm a paranormal investigator. I research UFO stuff as well. I'm best known for my dealings with negative haunts, the type of haunts where people are being attacked. That's what I'm best known for. But I research everything, and I came across, this popular subject of strange disappearances, people going missing without any logical explanation. And when I'm listening to some of these stories, I'm hearing some things that are present in some of these other, like the paranormal situations, like the alien abduction situations. And so even, the Bigfoot type stuff too. So I decided to kind of look into this, and it's really interesting. We're going to be covering national parks, particular tonight, where people are going missing in all kinds of national parks. And it's strange because what's interesting about that is, if people go missing, it's the national park that has to investigate it. Nobody else can come in and intervene because it's the national park. So, and it's almost like these missing cases are being covered up. And so we're going to be talking about some of that. So on an average, 90,000 people are missing in the United States on any given day. Of course, some of them are found or weren't missing at all. They just, but a lot of them do go missing without good explanation. And this is happening all around the world, but we're going to cover the United States today because that's where we live. So the National Park Service employs over 20,000 Americans and brings in an annual revenue of $92 billion. If patrons knew what was really happening within the park systems, it could have devastating financial consequences. There are now over 2,000 uncovered strange disappearances in our national parks that can't be explained with any reasonable logic. And like I said, so with all these cases, there's some common facts with all these, and people that go missing in these national parks, they almost always travel uphill. And that's absurd because a lot of these people are even tour guides, hiking guides, and they're trained when you get lost, what to do. We usually always go downhill, but they're always found at high elevations, much higher than where they went missing, and sometimes we're going to talk about this. They're found 20 miles away, and deceased with no scratches on them. There's no reason for them to have passed, but shortly after the people go missing, there's always like a rainstorm or snow that comes in, and it hampers the search efforts. It's kind of strange. So whatever's taking these people, are they smart enough to know that it's going to, all this water, the snow is going to wipe away the scent because the dogs can't track? They don't track these people. They'll go to where they went missing and they lay down. They don't pick up a scent. So these people, it's like the people are just missing. Just disappearing. So many times they're missing their clothes. Most of the time they're missing their shoes. And here's the strange thing. A lot of times they'll find the people with no shoes on. So like they're walking around in the woods with white socks on, and when they find the deceased body, the white socks are like bleach white. You think they'd be tattered, dirty, but they're not a lot of times. Um, During search efforts, there's a lot of helicopter and plane crashes while they're looking for these people. Um, Extreme ends of the intellectual scale. So a lot of times you have like, professors and physicists that go missing, but then you also have a lot of people that have disabilities that go missing, people that can't um, vocalize what happened to them while they were gone. Those are the ones that usually are returned alive, are the ones that aren't able to, describe what happened to them while they were gone. A lot of times people go missing in boulder fields, and so many times the victims are retrieved near bodies of water, and many times face up, which is not usually how it works. You find a body in water, they're usually always face down, but they're always face up. People get taken while picking berries. I don't know if whatever's doing this, using the berries as like, an appetizer, come get this, and then they snatch them like, bait. Shortly after being taken, so many of these people start not feeling well prior to being disappeared. They report not feeling well. Being first or last in line are the ones. So we could be walking, and I go over the knoll, and you're behind me, and you go over that knoll just seconds later, and I'm gone, nowhere to be found. You didn't hear nothing. I didn't scream. I'm just gone. And like I said, the search dogs can't or won't track. They just lay down. So now we're going to talk about some of the people, some strange cases, and I'm going to read these out because there's just so much information. I wanted to get it all to you. Ooh, I'm sorry. So Carl Landers, Carl Landers was a 69-year-old Orinda, California resident, disappeared on Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta is a really strange place. A lot of weird things happen on Mount Shasta, including UFO sightings. He disappeared on Mount Shasta, north of Sacramento, California, during an attempt to climb to the summit on May 25th, 1999. He was accompanied by two friends, Milton Gaines, age 64, and Barry Gilmore, age 60, who he had met through a local running club. He was an avid jogger and runner. He was in very good shape. Carl's colleagues and friends described him as an experienced climber, hiker, and distance runner in good shape. For 30 years, he had run every morning and even completed the Boston Marathon in 5 hours and 30 minutes. In his later years, he had the ambition to climb the highest peaks in every county of California. They reached they got there, they parked, they started heading out. They reached a spot that's called the 50-50 spot. It's a place where, kind of halfway there where you can camp. So they camped there overnight. In the morning, Carl was not feeling well, which is a common theme, and was a little cold. So he decided to get moving and to leave a little early toward Lake Helen on the way to the summit. His friends left 30 minutes after him. They watched him round a corner, so he was leaving in that direction, the way he was supposed to go. They left 30 minutes after him. Barry returned to camp because he too felt ill. Milt made it to Lake Helen and asked the ranger if he had seen anybody. The ranger said only one person. Milt went ahead for a little ways and decided that this person must not be Carl because he was way too fast. Milt couldn't catch him. Milt returned. They called for help. They brought in searchers, dogs, helicopters with forward-looking infrared. No sign whatsoever. The search and rescue effort was headed by a man named Grizz Adams. And that's the 50-50 spot where they camped. So this is Grizz Adams. Search effort was headed by a man named Grizz Adams, a veteran of over 400 searches, which is pretty impressive, in rescue operations. And during an interview, he said, "In 35 years, I've never had this happen to me. We were all over that mountain. He was not on the mountain. We brought canines in. They didn't pick him up. We flew around it. We dropped guys at the summit. They came down all sides. They could find him. They talked to people who were on the mountain. They didn't see him. There's snow around the path where he was, and nobody went outside the path. So there was no footprints veering off that path." When asked what he thought happened to Carl Landers on the mountain, he replied, "That's the $1,000,000 question. He either went up or in, but he's not on it." Carl and any of his belongings have never been found. James McGrogan is an interesting one too. In 2014, a medical doctor named James Grogan went on a split snowboard trip with friends in Vail, Colorado. Not many people have heard of split snowboarding. This is a sport that's a lot like cross-country skiing or hiking in snowshoes. He came prepared with a cell phone and satellite GPS system. He was much faster than his friends, so he said that he would wait for them at the next stop. They lost sight of him and never saw him at any of the stops along the trail. When the search team went looking for him, they found no tracks in the snow that veered off the trail, so they had no idea where he could have possibly gone. 5 days later, his body was discovered 4.5 miles away as the crow flies, which is a much greater distance, which was more like a 14-mile hike, as he would have had to climb up mountains in order to get there. His body was found by 2 hikers at the bottom of a frozen waterfall. The search party had gone over that area multiple times before, but had never seen him until that day. McGrogan was mangled in a strange position. His skull was crushed as if he had fallen from the sky, but he was still wearing his full ski outfit and his helmet. But there were no boots on his feet, and he had also taken off his gloves. The search and rescue team later found his discarded split snowboard, but they never found his boots. His cell phone and GPS were still working, and he had packed a battery backup. They tested the area where he was found, and there was a cell phone signal. Yet he never called anyone for help. The police deemed this as an accidental death and closed the case. And this one's really strange. Stephen Kubacki. So Stephen Kubacki, Lake Michigan Triangle. The case of Stephen Kubacki, who went missing for 15 months, then woke up in a field wearing different clothes. In February 1978, Stephen, a student at the time learning German, went missing in the Michigan area, USA. An area known as Great Lakes Triangle, which is written about in a book by Jay Gurley, Gourley. I'm not sure how you say that. That talks about disappearances of hundreds of ships, boats, and aircraft. Stephen said he was going to go skiing. They found his skis and his poles on the beach of the Lake Michigan and footprints on the ice leading up to the lake. They flew over it. The footprints appeared to stop. So they had the footprints going all the way up to the lake area, and then they just stopped. They didn't go anywhere. They just stopped. They found his backpack in the same general area. In May 5th, 1979, 15 months later, Stephen walked up to his father's door and said he didn't remember much. He woke up in Pittsfield, Mass., 40 miles from his father's house, lying in a meadow wearing clothes that weren't his. He had a small satchel beside him with maps that weren't his, and running shoes, I believe, too. Where he woke up was 700 miles from Lake Michigan. Reporters asked him if he would talk to someone. He said he didn't need to because he didn't have any psychological problems. After 1983, Stephen got his master's in linguistics and a PhD in clinical psychology, and he's still alive. John Doe. This is a really strange one. To protect the identity of the boy because he was young. It's a real case, but he's just John Doe. So John Doe strangely disappeared in, again, the Mount Shasta area of California and was found only 5 hours later, but he was found 5 hours later. So after that, one day, John's grandmother, Kathy, who is called Cappy, was playing with her grandson. Suddenly, he looked towards her and said he didn't like the other grandma, Cappy. Confused, she asked him what exactly he meant. John explained that while he was lost in the woods, he had been taken deep inside a mountainside by a woman he thought was Grandma Cappy. She led him into a cool, dark, spider-infested room filled with robots that looked almost like humans. Scattered across the floor were dusty purses, guns, various types of other weapons. As John anxiously faced his grandparent, he noticed an eerie light radiating from her head. In this moment, he realized she was not his real granny. Cappy firmly instructed the boy to defecate on a piece of paper. When he refused, she became increasingly agitated and repeatedly requested him to do so. Eventually, the grandma look-alike succumbed to frustration and moved on to a different topic. Allegedly, she informed John that he had been planted in his mother's womb and was actually from outer space. Shortly after this extraordinary account, she took the boy back outside to a thicket and advised him to wait for help. Only a year before she had gone on a camping trip within close proximity to where John's ordeal occurred, in the morning she awoke face down in dirt. Somehow she had been inexplicably taken from the sleeping bag within her tent and transferred a short distance away. Upon rousing, she felt an intense pain at the base of her neck. 2 puncture wounds were present, and the surrounding skin was red and inflamed. Another friend who accompanied her on the excursion suffered a matching affliction. The pair originally attributed these injuries to a possible spider bite. The only thing Kathy remembered about her ordeal were glowing red eyes peering through the darkness. Danny Philippidis, he's a firefighter in, as you can see, in Toronto, who came to New York February 2018. A Canadian man named Danny Philippidis was in New York on a ski trip with his friends. It was around 2 p.m. and they had been skiing for hours. They were getting ready to go into the lodge, and Danny said that he wanted to go on one more run down the mountain before their lunch break. By 4 p.m., Danny was not returning any calls or texts, and his friends were worried. They started looking for him, and after being unable to find him, they told the employees at the lodge that he was missing. 130 people scoured the mountain without any success of finding Danny. He simply was not there. 6 days later, Danny's wife received a phone call. She did not know the number, and it sounded far away and crackly. It was his voice. He was somewhat incoherent, and he sounded confused, and all of a sudden, he hung up the phone. She called the number back and told him to call 911 for help, and so he did. He had no idea where he was, and so he just described his surroundings. When the paramedics finally found him, he was still wearing all of his ski gear. He was holding a brand new iPhone, and someone had cut his hair. Somehow he ended up in Sacramento, California at the airport terminal, all the way from New York. He was in the car rental depot. Remember, he went missing in New York. So he was 3,000 miles away from where he had disappeared. He couldn't remember how he got there, and he did not know what day it was. When he learned where he was and how long people had been looking for him, he got very overwhelmed and emotional. But that's awful strange. This one happened ways ago, but it's still pretty interesting. It's a quick one. Catherine Van Elst, she got lost in the Ozark Mountains in 1946. She went missing after going for a walk near her camp. Getting lost in thick vegetation, Catherine was found alive 6 days later. So she was out there for 6 days. She was unharmed and seemingly unworried by her ordeal. When searchers called her name, she simply just stepped out of the cave saying, "Here I am." The park that Van Elst had gotten lost in was called Devil's Den, and those studying these mysteries have noted that children often seem to get lost in places with similar names. Some are named that by Native Americans, that translate to that, but similar names like this one. This is a younger photo, but the boy went missing at 5 years old. Alfred Balehartz. In 1938, a 5-year-old named Alfred Balehartz went missing in the Rocky Mountain National Park. A lot of missing people in that park too. He had gone with his dad to the river, and from there had wanted to go join 2 family friends a little further up the river. It was only when the group returned to camp that they noticed Alfred was missing. The day after he disappeared, a huge party searched the area. 6 miles away, 3,000 feet higher in elevation, a couple hikers in the nearby area looked up to see a young boy perched in a place called Devil's Nest. And from what I understand, it takes an extremely experienced climber to get up there. You have to be an A+ climber to get up to Devil's Nest, and the boy was in it. So that was 6 miles, 3,000 feet higher in the elevation than from where he went missing. Impossible. By the time they realized he was the missing boy and notified the searchers, he was already gone. He has never been found, not one trace. But the question is, how did he get so far? There's no way possible. And people now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, maybe an eagle took him." An eagle can only carry 5 pounds for so long. They'll pick up. They've been known to pick up small children, but they drop them within 20 feet. They just don't have the strength and longevity stamina to go that far. Maurice Demetz. In 1981, a 64-year-old man named Maurice Demitz went topaz hunting with his friend David McSweeney. Demitz had a PhD in theology. They drove to the Pike National Forest in California, or in Colorado, I'm sorry. Once they were in the park, they had to drive 16 miles down a dirt road until they reached a spot called Topaz Point. Native Americans claimed it was haunted by evil spirits. Early settlers called this place the Devil's Head. Again, the devil's word, which was increasingly a very interesting coincidence. So was it interesting because he had a theological background? Maurice could barely walk because he had bad knees. He needed David to help him down into a small hill to get to a sandy digging spot in the forest. When it was time to leave, David walked to Maurice's digging spot to say that he should go in about 10 minutes. He went back to his own digging site 150 yards away to clean up his tools, but when David returned to Maurice's spot, the elderly man was gone. With his bad knees, it would have been impossible for Maurice to climb up the hill on his own, and he couldn't have gone far into the forest, yet he was gone. He honked the horn, called for him, and searched for a long time. McSweeney flagged down a nearby car and asked them to find the police while he continued the search. The local authorities searched for 5 days, and yet they never found any evidence. The police closed the case, claiming they did all they could do. Demitz's wife sent a letter to the governor of Colorado to reopen the case, and she never received a reply. After a mini documentary about strange disappearances came out and had, a lot of publicity, it was pointing out that there have been clusters of similar disappearances in Devil's Head. The police reopened the Maurice Demitz case over 30 years after the disappearance. Keith Parkins. In 1952, a 2-year-old boy named Keith Parkins went missing from his home in Ritter, Oregon in the middle of winter. He had been playing outside with his jacket on, but he was far from equipped to spend the night outside alone. His family and local search party looked for him immediately. They followed his footprints a ways, but then they completely just stopped. There were no other animal or adult tracks nearby. 19 hours later, they found Keith. He was about 15 miles away as the crow flies, which would have been much greater distance because he would have had to climb up several mountains. He had also taken his jacket off and was laying face down in the snow on a frozen pond, but he was alive. When they asked him why he had run away and how he survived, he said he didn't remember. And that's a common theme too. People that are found don't remember what happened to them if they're found alive, obviously. A survival expert named Les Stroud, who's also known as the Survivor Man on TV, demonstrated just how impossible it would have been for a 2-year-old boy or anybody to walk so far in just 19 hours, especially at night. To this day, no one, and he wasn't able to do it. The Survivor Man, that's what this guy does. He's an expert at this. He was not able to do it. To this day, no one is sure exactly how Keith survived the night, and we may never know. All right, so doing a little bit better time than I thought. All right, so here's the cluster map of where these people are going missing. They're all happening in certain areas, so it's not like spread out. They're all happening in the national parks, but they happen, like I said, all around the same areas. So that's not a coincidence, obviously. A lot of times these people are found, sometimes they're not. And what's strange too, this has happened more than a few times, where they have these people searching for weeks. They'll park, they'll get to the trailhead, they go into the woods, they fan out, they look for the people, they do this day after day after day. But then so many times after just a few weeks, they park, just like they've been doing for days and weeks. They start to go towards the trailhead. There's a newly laid down tree blocking the trailhead with the body laying on top of that laid down tree, with no scratches, no bruises, but they're deceased. No logical explanation to why they died. And I got some theories about that. So, so here's that map. Because I want to consider everything. The way I do my research is I leave everything open. I look for trends, commonalities. So I'll bounce everything off of it until we know for sure. If I can disprove something or prove it, it's all on the table. So I was like, gee, I wonder how this lines up against and, you know, all these areas too are where a lot of Bigfoots are said to be spotted. But also, what about UFO sightings? So here's a map of UFO sightings. The only spot where it doesn't is like in the Texas area, but there's not really mountainous area in Florida where there's a lot of UFO sightings. There haven't been missing people, but everywhere else looks to match up. And so that leads me to this. So this is in these areas. Um, you have Bigfoot sightings, you have people going missing, you have UFO sightings, all in the same cluster areas, and so we call them paranormal flap areas because it's just there's areas of high strangeness, and these missing people it's happening in our flap areas. We're actually investigating several of them as we speak, and so you will have a lot of haunted homes in these areas. You'll have a lot of Bigfoot sightings, a lot of UFO sightings, and then you got the missing people. So, I mean, now why is that? All right, there has to be something. This is my idea: is there's something about this land that allows things to come and go. We think they may be even multiversal, but they're coming in from somewhere. Call it a portal, whatever you want to talk. But one of the main contributive factors to my most credible and most active paranormal cases are surrounded by rivers and streams. The rivers and streams are aiding the process of these things coming through. The homes that are haunted, you know, the really, really terribly haunted ones, the very, very active ones, all have rivers and streams around that area. All of our flap areas have rivers and streams around there. All these places where these people are going missing, all are surrounded by rivers and streams. So, you know, we can get into we could get pretty deep into that, but we don't have time for all that. But it's much more scientific. So another commonality too, and again, I don't think it's a coincidence. People that are abducted by aliens, they claim that they smell a sulfur smell prior to being abducted or prior to having a close encounter. They smell like a sulfur smell. People that experience poltergeist activity or are attacked by a negative parasitic entity often have a sulfur smell or a bad smell prior to things taking place. People who come across Bigfoot say that they smell a sulfur smell or something really gross prior to them having an encounter. And now, I don't think that the smell is coming from, I think it's a product of these things crossing over into our existence, you know, because for instance, with the haunted homes, the ones that are nasty, these things are attacking people, they're not haunting the home, they're haunting the people. I've done houses, you know, that, or for instance, that's why, like, when a family moves into a house that people have lived in happily for years, one family moves in and they're being attacked. It's because the parasites feed off of negative emotion. So if you have somebody that has a lowered emotional frequency or a lower emotional state of being, they target those people, and they want to get you to the state of fear. So so it's not the homes that are being haunted, it's the people. So these things are coming in from somewhere, and they're very real. They're a very real life form. And I believe that why, if Bigfoots exist, and I had an encounter in Pennsylvania, we'll talk about that, that I can't explain, a big giant hairy thing. My friend Paulino, that some of you might know, he had another encounter the same year, on a different investigation that we went to, same spot. So we don't see these things all the time, but I've followed Bigfoot tracks right here in southern New Hampshire. I'm originally from Massachusetts, but I live in southern New Hampshire. I went to this area that's a flap area in southern New Hampshire. I came across what looked like Bigfoot prints. They were circling all around. They didn't appear to come from anywhere. The snow was fresh. Nobody had been there, but there's just all of a sudden, there's like, it was searching for something. Then they trailed off about 100, 150 yards. I followed the tracks. They just stopped. I've been called to haunted homes where people's houses were going crazy. I'd go into the front door, walk into the dining room, go into the kitchen. I went to the back door, which was wide open. There was fresh snow on the deck and in the parking lot where nobody had been home from work. So it was all fresh snow. There was footprints coming into the house. So I'm thinking there's an intruder or something's happening. These people were across the street because they were so scared of what was happening in the house. I walked you could do a whole circle around the downstairs. So I go into the living room, I go back to the foyer, back into the dining room. Now every single chair is stacked up on top of the table, and I heard nothing. It wasn't like that just moments before. I go into the kitchen. All the bar stools were stacked up on top of each other in the middle of the kitchen. I go to the back door. Now there's footprints leading out of the house. I follow the footprints from where they came, and they where they started and stopped. They just ended and started in that spot. There was nowhere for them to have gone. So that's my point. And I think the water plays a process in all this. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but this water's present, has a big part to what's going on with the missing people, because a lot of times the people are found in water or in shallow water, but they didn't drown. They were just placed in the water after they were dead for a while. So water plays a big factor in all these things, the paranormal stuff and these missing people. Within these flap areas, the flap areas are the same as where the missing people are. So here's a flap area that this is pretty interesting. I think you guys are gonna like a video that I have. If it plays right, it didn't seem to want to play right in Zoom. So I mean, in a PowerPoint, it was kind of choppy. So if it is, I apologize. So here's a flap area. This is a home where we stay, Paulino and I, and we have other team members that we brought in. And so I had an encounter with a big hairy thing way out in here in the woods. They own all these woods, the pavilion. And I was sitting, Paul wasn't feeling well. We went to this one area where apparently there was like a meteor crash, and he's got like he reacts weird to certain metals, and he started to be anxious and he wasn't feeling well. So he went to lay down here in this house here, and they had a finished basement, like a little apartment thing, and to take a nap. It was around 3:00 in the afternoon. I drove out into the woods up here, and it was pouring rain, just coming down fast. I want to get my trail cams ready, so when it stops raining a little bit, I can set them out for the night. So I'm fumbling around with those. Next thing I know, excuse me, something catches my in my peripheral about my 1 or 2 o'clock, and I look up, and there's a thin tree line with the property that's beyond it is owned by somebody else, as a farmer. There's a cornfield, but it was May, I think, when this year of 2015, and there was no corn growing, but I could tell, it was. We later found out it was cornfield, and so in this thin tree line, I see what looked like 3 black things. I couldn't tell because of my vantage point, how big they were, what they were, but they were moving around really weird. And then I realized it was just one black thing, and it was moving bizarre. And I couldn't, what am I looking at? Like, I've seen bear in the woods. I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm just confused. And so I start to get my camera ready. I'm like, with the pouring rain, there's no way I'm going to get a clear shot of it. And we all seen these blurry photos on all over the place where people say that was a Bigfoot, but you can't tell. I don't want to be that guy. So I get my truck ready. Now, it had been idling, and I think because of the pouring rain, that's why whatever this thing didn't hear my truck idling, because it was pouring so hard. So I get my camera ready, I put it in drive, and I mat it, and I want to get up there close enough to take a picture, and it takes off, and I just see these 2 arms swinging really with just huge arms. I never saw a face, so I don't know. I can't say for sure what it was. All I know, it wasn't a bear, because bears don't run like that, and it didn't look like a bear, and it just was gone. But before I put it in drive, I noticed that it was as tall as a keep out sign that was on the tree. So I made note of that. So I tried to cut it off. It was long gone. I didn't know where it went. I backed up to the tree, walked up to that sign, and this thing had to have been 8 foot tall, because I'm 6 foot with my boots on, and this top of the sign was about 2 feet taller than I am. And I promised you on everything that is a true story. Paul had one September of the same year in this field back here, actually right about here. But this area is very strange. So we got called there because since the 50s, they've been seeing Bigfoot. They've been seeing a lot of UFOs. The guy's an artist. He actually drew pictures of some of the stuff the UFOs that he's seen. There's 3 family homes on this property. There's one way back out here, and then there's one way over here. and they all have experiences constantly. Actually, we do town meetings in this town every time we go, and we get all sorts of people. We pack rooms with people from the town. They all have a story. A little 7-year-old girl that started crying, she wanted to tell us her story, but she was so scared of what she witnessed in the middle of the road staring at her, she couldn't get the words out, and she was just crying and very emotional. But we have all sorts of people, all different age ranges, that all have stories about seeing like these Bigfoot creatures and UFOs. So one night, our last visit there, we were all stationed in different areas. You had one guy, Alexander Petikoff, he's a documentary kind of filmmaker guy. He's also into Bigfoot stuff. So he was down by this ravine where somebody had seen a Bigfoot before. It was a retired police officer that went up there he got into Bigfoot stuff, that he went there to research. This is before the family learned about us. And he had an encounter with what he said looked like a teenage Bigfoot. And he had a sketch, which I'll show you in a minute. So we had different people stationed different places. Paul was in a field further back from. Anyway, so I said, you know what, guys, there's an electrical storm going on in our south. We're at a high elevation, and you could see way down in it was just lightning going like crazy. But our skies were crystal clear. The stars were brilliant. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was just sharp, really sharp. But I said, there's a lot more UFO sightings during electrical storms. I think we should all meet back at base camp and skywatch. And I just had a feeling. And so we all did. They all did. Paul was the last one to show up. Within 15 minutes of him showing up, me and Alexander caught this light on the side of our peripheral. And Alexander was like, what the heck is that? And now at first it was just a real bright light. It was round, big, bright light. And we didn't know, we couldn't hear anything. It was totally silent. And it just started to change shape and grow. It took on a shape of a peanut, as you can see in the picture. This disc, we didn't get to film that because we had already put a lot of our gear down, and our phones, because of the ISO or whatever, it didn't record it so well. We couldn't really capture it on our phones, even though it was so brilliant and bright in the sky. So by the time Paul Eno's the one that recorded it with, it's like a night vision binocular that can record, and it was the first time he ever used it. So it took him a little while to get it powered up and figure out what he was doing. This disc here came out of down here. Now this area here was darker than the dark of the sky, which made no sense to me. It came out of here. It flew up around up to the top, and let me see. Here's a negative of it. This thing made no noise. It was traveling towards us and then it started to turn away, and it ended up going northeast away from us until we couldn't see it no more. And totally silent, just had us all like, I've been doing this over 30 years. Paul's actually celebrating his 50 years in the paranormal. We've seen a lot of crazy things. We work on some of the biggest cases. I've seen plenty of UFOs. I've been pretty close to some real strange UFO cases, but this was just really weird, just unlike anything I've seen before. Don't know what that big mass was. Don't know. I don't think it was like a mothership. It was almost like, it actually looks like a rendering of like physicists, if they theorized on what a white hole would look like. But what was strange is, I don't know if it was some kind of window because that opened in space-time or what, because it formed, and after it formed, that disc came out and then flew behind it, exactly the way some physicists say a UFO makes its way through the sky. It distorts gravity in front of it and it gets sucked through. And they say that it would look something like this. Was it the electrical storm that was going on that allowed us to see this mass? Had that electrical storm not been taking place, would we have only seen the UFO and not this mass in front of it? I have to think about that. So, but here's the video, and I think it's going to be choppy, and I apologize. It's really a smooth and real good video, but something happened in PowerPoint and made it choppy, but I'll play it for you. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. And notice how it starts to change shape. It went from a peanut, and it ends up looking like a bow tie towards the end. Very, very odd. And that disc is still there. You can barely see it, but it is there. So here's where it starts to change. All right, so, and just after that, once it went out of sight, Paul put the binoculars down. Me and Alexander kept watching. Everyone else was like, "Whoa, whoa!" Me and Alex were still watching the area, and after that went out of sight, a giant disc flew from the right to the left, right in front of us. I mean, it was fast, but it was not one of those two objects. It was a totally different object. Um, and let's see. And here's the area. So I had a drone with me, and this is a picture from my drone I took the next day. This is the area in which it traveled. So when it was disappearing, it was going in this direction, northeast. Um, and then I'll tell you a story of, there's a high elevation over here that happened the next night. And I can't play the audio because I don't know how to play the audio for you with the setup. So, but anyways, so the next night, this had probably a bigger impact on us. We had gone up to this mountain to do some more sky watching. It's the highest elevation, even though we're at a high elevation already, and it's the Continental Divide in this town. So up there, they got a picnic table. They got like a plaque for the Continental Divide and a flag, and American flag. So we went up there. It was late, and I had an idea. I'm like, why not try this? Play these tones that were recorded by SETI on Mount Shasta. And here we're bringing up Mount Shasta again, where all these people are going missing, and a lot of UFO sightings. But there was this recording by SETI of this strange frequency. So I'm like, why not try playing it? So I had a speaker, a Bose speaker, and I played this tone for a little while. And so we stayed for a little while longer, didn't see nothing. We went back to base camp, which was a house, and in the garage they had tables, and we started taking off all our gear and putting it on the table. And all of a sudden, now it's 1:30 in the morning, around there, all of a sudden we hear beep, and we can't tell where it's coming from. Everyone's grabbing their phones. Everywhere you walked, it sounded like it was just in your head, like you couldn't tell where it was coming from. But what's strange was, just in the next room over, and the door was cracked, was Charles Credo, who's part of our team. He interviews people. He's a good interviewer, and he was laying down, getting ready to put his CPAP on, and he didn't hear nothing. The people that own the house was upstairs with the windows open. They heard nothing. Didn't make sense. So me, Alexander Petikoff, and Paul Eno at the time were in the garage, and we're hearing it, and it's loud, and it's just beep. And so I go over to the laundry room door, and I said, maybe it's the washer and dryer, maybe the tone is stuck or something. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I open the door. It's still, I can't tell where it's coming from. Lori Greer, who's the casting director for Behind the Paranormal, was with us, and her son. And so she came in from getting her pajamas or whatever and pillow from outside, and she goes, "What is that?" And as soon as she walked in the door, she's like, it's above my head. And we're like, yeah, it's everywhere. And so I stick my head outside. It's clearly, this tone is inside around us. It's not outside. That's why she didn't hear it when she was out there. All of a sudden, it goes beep, and it goes up into the sky. And so we go outside. It moved us outside. Alexander's like, guys, it's like, he's freaking out. He's like jumping up. It's right up there. And so, and then it stops. And we're all whispering, because we're just like, it was almost, gosh, it almost felt not spiritual, but it wasn't a negative thing. It had a positive impact on me. I can't explain it, and it did Paul as well. He and I think were more impacted by it in a positive way, and we're not sure why. We said we got to talk about this, but we actually never have, and we need to, because it really had a strong impact on him and me. So then it came back all of a sudden, beep, and it started to move down the road, down this dirt road, above the road, and then it just stopped again. Um, Now, we don't know what it was. I sent the tone out to a guy in Edmonton, in Canada, that I know. He's a frequency expert. The guy's a brilliant dude, and he was looking for data in this tone, because it was like, what I told him was, what's interesting is that tone was in the same exact key. I'm a musician. It was in the same exact key as the one I played on the mountain. That cannot be a coincidence. It was like an answer to us. And so he said it was because the recording was recorded on the phone. He was like, it's like a pixely photo, so if there was anything embedded, it's too choppy, I can't pull it out. But he goes, I can tell that it sounds like in the data it looks like it started to move away from you at the end. I'm like, yeah, it did. So he was able to confirm that with whatever he saw. But um very interesting. And what is strange is, within a week of me and Paul returning. Paul lives in Rhode Island, I live in New Hampshire. After that case, within a week, Paul and I both had missing time. I lost over about 2.5 hours of time. Paul lost 2 hours at one point. Um, I was driving to a hardware store, and I was on this area they call the Sharon Stretch, and it's a very strange road anyways. A lot of bad things happen on that road. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting in a parking lot. And I planned that visit to go around that time because I was going to grab lunch while I was there. So I would have gotten there about 11:30 or so. It was 2.5 hours later when I realized I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot. 2.5 hours later, I don't know what happened, and it happened to Paul as well. Oops. Okay. So here's that picture of the Bigfoot that was seen by that retired police officer. He had one of those police people that do the drawings, draw this for him. That's what he said he saw in this ravine. So here's another flat area where weird things happen. This was taken actually near my house. I live in a very strange area, and this was seen. This UFO was seen by many people. I got like 30 reports that night. One from a police officer who saw the same thing. My cameras picked it up. I have strange things happening on my property all the time, so I have cameras set up, and so people saw this, but some people saw it at a closer distance. It was much closer to them. They said it was massive, just absolutely massive. Hours later, we had fighter jets soaring over our towns. One set off a countermeasure flare, so that was no coincidence either. But like I said, flap area. Someone sent this to me in another flap area. So this a flap area, trail cam. This trail cam was over 7 foot high. It was placed 7 foot high. Whatever this is looking down on the trail cam. I can't figure it out. I don't know what it is. Obviously, it's whited out, but it was no human. It was I don't know what it is, but it's something that was pretty curious. But this flap area is also an area where people go missing. And so this one I'll be real quick because we're almost up on that hour. But Connecticut flap area, there's another flap area that we're doing, and there's been missing people close to this area the flap area that we're investigating. But there is a cluster of missing people there. This area, you can read about this book. It's called The Haunted House Diaries by William J. Hall. He wrote about, it was first Paul's case. Actually, Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated this house years ago. Paul got involved with it in 2005 and joked around with Bill, said, hey, you should write a book about it. And Bill's like, all right. And so he wrote a book about it. But it basically, the lady has lived there she was the fifth generation. Her family, the first generation, was the ones that built the house. So she's lived there her whole life, and all her whole life she's been writing on pieces of paper, on envelopes, on whatever weird things that have happened. And William Hall compiled those and wrote a story. I was involved with the investigation of the house. Um, but this whole area, it's not just her house that's weird, it's this whole area, which we don't have time to get really into. But so I don't know if you guys can see this very well. This was a motion activated camera that went off within this flap area. So it took a picture, sent to the person's phone. This person's like, what is that standing in my kitchen? So police met them at the house. They found no forced entry. Everything was locked up. Nothing was missing. But you have this strange creature. So the eyeball is here. It's got this domed head. Its left elbow is here. This is a centerpiece on the table right here. Left elbow. I hope you guys can see my cursor. And then the right arm is on the counter, or it looks like the hand is on the counter, but it's looking down at the floor. So this is a real foe. This is a real creature. We don't know what it is. Obviously not human, and was not there when the police arrived. But this is in a strange flap area again, and an area where people go missing. So this photo was taken in 2005 by Paul, and actually was by the homeowner. She was in this room and she heard something weird. Her kitchen's very active. A lot of weird things happen in her kitchen. So she decided to take a picture in the area of her kitchen, and she got this weird light effect. And it was a digital camera, but she's got this. She can see a period from 1968 in this photo overlapping with the present. I can't make it out, so I can't show you, but you got all this weird effect. And so we're talking about this to promote that book that I told you about, and on the show. And this person from Indiana says, you guys are talking about the weird light effect, but what about that gray alien in the doorway? So we looked again, we're like, what is he talking about? So there's this face that's appearing just in front of that refrigerator, and on the right is a close-up on it, but you can see the eye, what looks to be a nose and a mouth, and these weird squiggly things coming off of it. And the homeowner has seen an alien that looked like that, standing within her vanity. She heard a noise in her bathroom down the hall. She could see down the hall while she was in bed, and she could look right in there. And she heard a noise. She looked over, and there was what looked like a gray alien occupying the same spot as her vanity, like it was standing within it. And this house is weird like that. You get all kinds of strange things happening at this house. Also in flap areas, and also this is reported in the places where people go missing. People have reported walking and seeing this smudgy looking blurred spot in the middle. I took this photo because I've seen this so many times in haunted homes, but also in flap areas out in the woods and stuff. And a lot of times you'll see this prior to activity taking place. You'll see this in a home, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's weird things happening in the house. You'll see this out in the woods. Somebody goes missing. Some people have reported putting their foot into this and their foot disappeared. They couldn't see their foot no longer. Actually, quite a few people have reported that. But this is a real photo. It was taken because it was what I was looking at. And this was rare to be able to capture that. But this happens, like I said, in the cases where people go missing and haunted homes and everything. So there's those commonalities between these fields. And so I think that brings us to this. So the whole thing is, are these people being taken by aliens, Bigfoot, or are they accidentally passing through some type of portal that can also allow other beings to come and go? Maybe if that's the case, if people, they enter into this portal, because a lot of times these people will be walking, they turn around, and what's behind them shouldn't be there. They're somewhere else, and they don't know how they got there. They don't know where they are. So is it some type of portal? And maybe these people they go missing for weeks or months, then they're found and their body has only been dead for like a week, but yet they've been missing for months. It doesn't make sense. Is it that they're disappearing in some kind of portal and their body can't survive the re-entrance this is just things that you got to keep open. Or is it aliens or Bigfoot? But something strange is happening. And you guys can, can count on researchers like myself to pursue all the answers. And that's what I'm continuing to do. I'm Shane Sirois. Thanks for joining me this evening. And if we do have time for questions, we can take questions.
Yeah, Shane, we'll take about 5 questions here. Heidi would like to know, have you ever spoken with any national park employees recently? And if so, what are they seeing?
I have not, but I was going to not bring up this gentleman's name because I don't like him as a person, but he's a guy that has spent a lot of time. He's wrote a lot of books about this subject, so he deserves that credit. And his name is David Paulides, and he has spoken to. Actually, this is how he started writing books about this stuff, is because he was approached by these park services. He was a Bigfoot hunter at first, and then, well, he still is too, but these park rangers came to him and said, "Hey, we got to talk to you. There's something strange, and we'll lose our jobs if we talk about this because it's being covered up. There's some strange stuff happening to people in these woods," and that's how. So he's talked to plenty of them, and you can look him up. David Paulides. His books are like the Missing 401 series. I've had correspondence. I'm not a big fan of him as a person, but he has very successful books and good information.
All right, and you touched on this already, but maybe you can expand upon it. Charisse wants to know about the similarities and commonalities with the people who went missing.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many of them. Their clothes are usually always taken off, which, even if in the winter, I mean, when you get so hypothermic, you start feeling hot. So people will start disrobing, but even in cases where it's 70 degrees outside, people's clothes are found missing. Here's one strange one. This person, so they were sitting on a log. It appeared that they were sitting on a log. Their body was nowhere to be found, but their clothes looked like they had just fallen into themselves, like the person was just taken out of the clothes. And this is reported a lot, where the clothes have just collapsed, like the body just disappeared. But in one case, the person's feet were still in the boots, but the body was gone and the clothes had just collapsed into themselves. So something to do with shoes. The feet are a lot of times cut off or disregarded, or but their shoes are almost always off. And like I said, a lot of times the socks will be bleach white. They're a lot of times found in shallow water. Even in Europe, they're finding feet are washing up in shoes. I mean, so, and there's people going missing over there, actually all around the world. But some of those commonalities, the most is like the whole clothes thing and the feet. Also, the storms that come in right after these people go missing. Something is so intelligent that it knows and it's planning this. And it could be because it washes away scent, tracks, radiation. If we're going to consider UFOs or aliens taking them, then it could be washing away radiation for that matter. But so that can't be a coincidence that almost all these strange cases where people go missing with no logic, there's a storm that happens right after, like immediately right after. And so those are some of the biggest ones. Yeah.
A couple more questions, Shane. Eric would like to know, did the missing people have any evidence of hallucinogens in their bodies?
No, some of the ones that David Paulides wrote about, I researched and found out that was the case. So I won't tell those stories because there was one that it was a football player, 245 pounds solid muscle. He was a star in college. He was an avid outdoorsman. He went fishing, calls his wife, says, "I'm being followed. There's something following me." Phone goes dead. They found him deceased. I think it was like weeks later. All his clothes were taken off. His fishing waders were put back on, but they were on backwards. And they did find hallucinogenics in his body. So even though the case still sounds so weird to me, I just can't talk about it because of that fact. But also Eliza Lamb, if you guys are familiar with her, she's the Asian girl that was from Canada who was staying in California in a hotel, and she could be seen in a video. If you look it up, ELISAMLAM, Eliza Lamb, on YouTube, you'll see the video. But so she walks into a elevator and she's scared. She keeps looking out and she's scared. But what's strange is she's pushing the button. The door won't close. It stays open for minutes. And you know, elevator door only take 10 seconds, then it'll close. She's trying to get the thing to close frantically. It won't close. She keeps looking out into the hallway. She ducks back in. She's pushing the button. It won't close. Finally, she walks out. It looks like she's talking to somebody. And then she goes back in the elevator. A little while later, still won't close. She goes back out into the hallway and she takes a right and she disappears. As soon as she took that right and walked, the elevator door closed. She had to pass through. So they found her body in the water tank up on top of the building. What's strange about her is she had to pass through 2 security points. She had to have a passcode and a key in order to get on the roof. She had to have a passcode to get it through one door and a key to get onto the roof. She was found in that water tank with the lid was so heavy that there's no way this little girl could have moved it. She was a young adult, but she was a petite thing. It took 2 guys to get the ladder to put it up on the tank and move that lid, but she was wedged in there. They had to cut the tank open because she was wedged in there so tight, and she was nude. She was supposed to be on anti-psychs and depression medicine that she had not been taken, even though it was impossible physically. And even with the passcodes to get onto the roof, there's definitely something strange there. But because of those anti-psychs and the meds that she wasn't taking, I just can't talk about it because, it's obviously a strong possibility, but something definitely weird happened with her.
Final question, 2-part question. Renee would like you to explain what a flap area is, and Rachel would like to know where are the most active flap areas in Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Okay. So a flap area is an area of high strangeness. So there's environmental elements that are at work here. So there's components that that are feeding or allowing these strange things to happen. So in the event of these, like I said, the homes aren't haunted, the people are, and they're more apt to be attacked by these things that come through in areas around rivers and streams. And I think that that those things, not only rivers and streams, especially with high metals or whatever, is creates electricity, and it can feed it that way. I also think it's manipulating these mechanics and allowing these crossovers to come through these things. Like I said, so there's also other things that you can consider too, but that's my thought on those flap areas. But there's these areas, like I said, what's strange is they all have a lot of UFO sightings and Bigfoot in haunted homes, but all of them are surrounded by rivers and streams. So I know that is a strong, even the I can't think of the name anyway. So New Hampshire, probably the strongest one that I've encountered in New Hampshire. There's some weird things that happen in the White Mountains, but I think the strongest flap area in New Hampshire is probably southern New Hampshire, where I live. There's an area it's in Wilton, New Hampshire, that just all kinds of strange things happen in this town called Wilton. And I've been witness to it through so many years. Massachusetts, I grew up there. I can't say that I really encountered a real strong flap area in Massachusetts. Of course, everyone talks about Bridgewater Triangle. I'm hearing that that's really kind of dying down, that there's not really a whole lot going on there anymore. And believe it or not, I've never investigated. Doing this as long as I have, I've never gone there because I'm more focused on helping people with their negative haunts. But also these flap areas that we're introduced to were for the sole purpose of somebody that lives within these flap areas that need our help. So we go there and we end up realizing that it's this whole area. It's not just the people that we're there to help. So we help them, but we also branch out. And in the one in Connecticut is actually, this is strange. I'll be quick. The flap area in Connecticut, we found that there's this old dairy farm. This is the one that's written about in that book, that the barn was torn down. The silos. I'm hearing myself talk here.
We can hear you, Shane.
Yeah, it's echoing back to me. It's driving me crazy. Oh, it's better. Okay. So they tore down the barn, The silos remained. They put metal sheeting down where the barn was. This is in that flap area now. They excavated underneath the ground. We see all the dirt being piled out in the back. So after all that was done, they rebuilt the barn the same way it was before. Next thing you know, there's vent stacks in transformers sticking out of the prairie. There's no farming going on there. There's no livestock. There's no nothing. There's usually black vehicles in there. This small bungalow house. It's the size of a small apartment. Now, here's the strange thing is we see military trucks and vehicles coming from that area. It's a dirt road. It's out in the country. So we think, oh yeah, and we know somebody was told to leave that area by a guy in military fatigues and a machine gun. So we're like, the military must be here because this is a flap area, this high strangeness. They must be investigating this too, or whatever. So we looked into it. I found out that this property was purchased, and by it was a brother and sister, and 30 days after they purchased it, they erected this tower across the street, radio tower across the street that was registered to Army Corps of Engineers. They also, right after that, were the ones that tore down the building, started excavating underneath, which didn't make no sense. And so I looked into them, did a background check on them. They're brother and sister, or son and daughter, to a man that owns an aerospace defense. He's an aerospace defense contractor. And now what the military does when they have a secret installment, and I know people that have been in them, and they've told me this, they don't put it in their name. They put it in their contractor's name to cover it up. And so I have one guy, he was in special ops, and he said he's been in over 200 secret places like that in the United States alone. He said, and if you could be driving down the road and you see this boarded up house that looks all rickety and stuff, he goes, I've been in ones just like that, but there's a whole base underneath. You'll never know. But that case there, very, very interesting, because there's definitely a military presence at this farm. Oh, and it sold for something like something million for this rickety barn and this rickety little bungalow, and then a field that wasn't even that big. So that told me whoever owned it didn't want to sell it, but whoever wanted to buy it really wanted to buy it. So very odd.
Interesting. So Shane, we have come up to about 8:15. I'm getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. So we'll wrap it up. Shane, do you have any last words you want to leave with the group?
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking a listen. This is a fascinating subject. I'm most known for, dealing with the negative haunts and stuff, but I really like this subject, and I hope you guys found it interesting. And there's so many more interesting stories about these people, and you'll have a lot of fun digging into this. So there's plenty of information online, and it's just mind-boggling. I think you'll really enjoy this topic going forward.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Shane. I'm going to think twice before I go to my next national park. But I want to thank you for speaking with us tonight, fitting us into your busy schedule. I want to remind folks to check their email tomorrow morning and fill out that feedback survey. Let us know what you thought and what you'd like to see for future events. So thank you all again, and I'm going to stop the recording, and we're going to wrap up here. So thanks so much, and everyone have a good night. Thanks again, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you all.